Tonight, let's take a deep breath and descend together into silence. Beneath the waves, far from the noise of the surface world, there are stories, not of kings or wars, but of cities that once breathed and now sleep under the sea. This is not a tale of fantasy. It's a whisper, buried in sediment and memory. In the dark, at the edge of myth and ruin, lies a forgotten city. Its columns broken, its streets drowned, its name almost lost. But tonight, we remember it. Not to solve it, not to prove it, but simply to sit with it. Welcome to Epic Stories for Sleep. You're safe here. Let's begin.
Vast, endless, and dark. To us, it is both the cradle of life and the keeper of secrets. Sometimes when you stand on the shore and hear the waves crashing against stone, it feels like something is calling from beneath. A whisper. A memory from a time long lost. Not everything lying beneath the sea is a shipwreck or coral reef. Somewhere down there are ruins, fragments of once thriving civilizations. Cities swallowed by water, buried in silt, their names forgotten by history, but not by the sea. You've heard of Atlantis, the legendary city of gold and pride, vanished in a single day. But Atlantis is only the beginning. Out there lie real cities, with real stones, real streets, real gods. And with them, real stories. Imagine for a moment, you're a diver, descending into darkness, heart pounding. Around you, silence, broken only by your breath and the pull of the deep. Then you see it. A staircase. Massive stone blocks. A perfect right angle. A road. You feel it in your bones. This is no accident of nature. Someone once lived here. Human history is written on land. But beneath the waves lies a history we barely know. What was lost to the ocean has also been lost to our memory. And so, when structures like Yonaguni in Japan or Heracleion in Egypt are found beneath the sea, it's not just archaeology, it's a jolt to the human soul. A voice rising from the deep. What have we forgotten? Throughout time, civilizations rose beside water. Rivers, seas, lakes, all brought trade, power, life. But water is not kind. Floods, earthquakes, melting ice ages, entire towns, maybe even metropolises were swallowed. Gone, erased. And without survivors, no stories remain. When the philosopher Plato spoke of Atlantis more than 2,000 years ago, he didn't just describe a city. He spoke of a mighty empire, rich, radiant, proud, destroyed by its own arrogance. Was it allegory, or was it memory? People have looked for Atlantis everywhere. The Caribbean, the Mediterranean, the depths of the Atlantic. Some say it was real. Others say it's only a symbol. But then came Heracleion. For centuries, Heracleion was thought to be myth, a name in dusty scrolls, until divers found its remains off Egypt's coast. Colossal statues, temples, streets, real, tangible, lost for over 1,000 years. And suddenly, the myth didn't feel so mythical anymore. We live on a planet in constant motion. Tectonic plates shift, ice melts, oceans rise, and each time they do, something is buried. But stone remembers, even if we forget. A carved pillar, a broken gate, a stairway that leads to nowhere but whispers. Each ruin is a letter in a book that only the sea has read. And now, we will try to read it too. This is the beginning of a journey, a search for the lost cities beneath the waves, where the ocean is a veil and memory is our lantern. We begin not to prove that Atlantis was real, but to listen to what the water has never stopped whispering. Off the southern shores of Japan, where the Pacific Ocean crashes against the cliffs of the Ryukyu Islands, lies something that defies explanation. Beneath the waves, hidden for thousands of years, sits a structure that challenges everything we think we know about history. Its name is Yonaguni. At first glance, Yonaguni looks like a natural rock formation, weathered, carved by currents, just another feature of the seabed. But then you look closer. Massive stone steps, perfectly rectangular. Terraces, sharp, aligned with geometric precision. Columns, pathways, even what seems to be a grand staircase. Could it be a man-made structure? In 1986, a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake was exploring the seabed near Yonaguni Island, searching for hammerhead sharks. Instead, he stumbled upon something far more unexpected. A massive, stepped monument, measuring over 165 feet long and 65 feet tall, buried in the depths, as if a forgotten temple had fallen from the land and sunk into time. He brought the news to marine geologists, and soon the debates began. Some claimed it was a natural formation, the result of sandstone eroding in horizontal layers. Others, like Professor Masaki Kimura, believed without a doubt. This was man-made, a sunken city, perhaps 10,000 years old. If he was right, it would rewrite human history. Kimura spent years studying the site. He claimed to find signs of walls, roads, and even tools nearby, possibly remnants of a prehistoric civilization, one that existed before the end of the last ice age. That would place Yonaguni well before the rise of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, the cradles of civilization as we know them. But not everyone agreed. Geologists from around the world pushed back. They pointed to similar formations in other parts of the ocean, saying the shapes, though striking, were not impossible in nature. No artifacts had been found embedded in the site itself. No carvings, no pottery, no bones. So which is it? Nature's masterpiece, or a civilization lost to time? Let's set science aside for a moment, and just imagine. You are descending into the deep blue waters off Yonaguni. The light fades. The pressure builds. Then suddenly, a monolith rises before you. Step after step, each one precise, massive, impossible to believe. It feels ancient. It feels sacred. You swim along corridors that seem to lead nowhere, yet feel as if they once carried purpose. You run your hand along a wall, and it gives the sensation, not of accident, but of intent. There's a stillness here, a silence that speaks louder than any discovery. And then comes the thought. If a civilization once stood here, who were they? What stories did they tell? What gods did they worship? What fate met them when the sea came calling? Some believe Yonaguni could have been part of Mu, a mythical lost continent, much like Atlantis, believed by some to have once spanned the Pacific. Others think it might have been a ceremonial site, or even the foundation of a fortress, built long before modern Japan ever emerged. But there is one undeniable truth. Yonaguni stirs something in us, because whether it's man-made or not, the mystery is real. And mystery is what makes us human. Kimura once said, "Even if science cannot yet explain it, the ocean will not lie. Yonaguni holds a truth, and it is waiting." What makes this place more haunting is the possibility that had sea levels not risen, it might still be standing above the waves today, walked upon by our ancestors. Instead, it sleeps, in salt, in silence. And yet, it calls to us, perhaps not to prove its origin, but to remind us that what we know is only a fraction of what has been. And the ocean is not finished revealing its secrets. Before Alexandria rose, before the library, the lighthouse, and the scholars of antiquity, there was another city. A city lost not in legend, but in mud and water. Its name was Heracleion, and for centuries, it was believed to be nothing more than myth. Ancient Greek historians mentioned it in passing, a place where Heracles, the mighty hero, once set foot. A gateway where Helen of Troy and Paris supposedly first arrived in Egypt, a city of splendor, wealth, and divine rituals, swallowed by time. No maps pointed to it. No ruins were known. Only whispers in ancient texts, until the sea gave it back. In the year 2000, off the coast of modern-day Alexandria, a team led by French marine archaeologist Franck Goddio made a discovery that stunned the world. There, beneath 30 feet of murky water and thick layers of silt, lay the remains of Heracleion, the gateway to Egypt before Alexandria was even built. A metropolis lost for over 1,200 years. The divers found colossal statues, some 16 feet tall, toppled and broken but still majestic. They uncovered temple walls, stone anchors, gold coins, and inscriptions in both Greek and ancient Egyptian. There were ships, perfectly preserved. There were ritual tables, once used in ceremonies to the god Amun. There were faces carved in stone, staring up from the seabed as if waiting. And in that moment, myth became memory. What caused Heracleion to sink? Unlike the drama of Atlantis, this was not an instant cataclysm. Heracleion was built on the Nile Delta, a soft, unstable mix of sand and clay. Over centuries, the ground shifted. Earthquakes rocked the region. The city grew heavier, and the earth softer. Bit by bit, buildings tilted, streets flooded. And sometime between the 2nd and 8th century AD, Heracleion gave way. The land beneath it liquefied, and the city slipped into the sea. It wasn't destroyed by fire or war. It simply sank. And then, it was forgotten. There is something haunting about Heracleion. Not because it was a myth proven real, but because it was real and yet still became myth. A city bustling with priests, traders, pharaohs, and sailors, where ceremonies were held, taxes collected, offerings made to gods long since abandoned. And then, silence. Imagine walking down its stone docks, the air heavy with incense and river mist. Boats from Greece, Phoenicia, and Nubia arriving with goods. Temples rising above the skyline, their columns lined with gold leaf. Then imagine it all, underwater, still there, just hidden. Heracleion teaches us something powerful. That time doesn't always erase. Sometimes it preserves. In mud, in darkness, in silence. And sometimes, when we look deep enough, the past looks back. Franck Goddio once described the moment his team uncovered the face of a fallen statue. As the mud cleared and the face emerged, eyes closed, lips soft, it was as if the sea was finally letting someone breathe again. That's the magic of underwater cities. They're not just ruins. They are pause buttons in history. Places caught between worlds. Not quite dead. Not quite alive. The recovery of Heracleion has given us treasures, yes. But more than that, it gave us context. It reminded us that history isn't fixed. It can sink. It can hide. And then, one day, it can return. And it makes us wonder, How many more Heracleons lie beneath the waters of our world? Still sleeping, still waiting. In the sacred texts of ancient India, there is a city described in glorious detail. A kingdom of golden towers, bustling markets, and divine power. A place said to be ruled by none other than Lord Krishna, the beloved deity of Hindu tradition. Its name was Dwarka. According to legend, Dwarka was no ordinary city. It shone brighter than the stars, built by celestial hands. It had 900,000 grand palaces, each crafted of silver and emerald. The streets were paved with crystal. And above all, it was protected by divine forces. But just as quickly as it rose, it fell. When Krishna left the world, the city was swallowed by the sea. For centuries, it was a myth. A story from the Mahabharata, a spiritual metaphor, a symbol, not a sight. Until divers found something beneath the waters of the Arabian Sea. In 2001, marine archaeologists from India's National Institute of Ocean Technology were conducting surveys off the coast of Gujarat. They expected to find geological formations. What they discovered instead was far more mysterious. At depths of 30 to 40 meters, they found stone walls, right angles, rectilinear structures stretching over 5 miles along the seabed. They recovered pottery shards, tools, and beads, some dated as far back as 9,500 years ago. This was no myth, it was real, and it might be one of the oldest urban settlements on Earth. Suddenly, the story of Dwarka wasn't just sacred poetry, it was history. Still, debate surrounds the discovery. Some scholars warn against linking the ruins too directly with the mythological Dwarka. They argue the structures may be remnants of an early settlement, but not the golden kingdom of Krishna. After all, the Mahabharata blends history and myth like rivers into an ocean. But others, historians, spiritual leaders, and scientists alike, point to the location, the layout, and the age of the site. Too many coincidences, too many alignments. Is it not possible, they ask, that the legend was born from memory? That something extraordinary once stood there, and its story, passed down over thousands of years, became divine? Imagine this. You descend into the Arabian Sea. The water is thick with sediment, dimming the sunlight. And then, beneath you, straight lines, platforms, foundations. You reach down and pick up a piece of carved stone, its edges worn by time, but clearly shaped by hands long vanished. You look out across the seabed, and it feels like walking a city of ghosts. You don't need to believe every line of scripture to feel the truth. Something stood here, something ancient, something vast, and then the sea took it. One passage from the Mahabharata describes how the sea rushed in with a mighty roar and engulfed Dwarka, leaving behind nothing but silence. For centuries, that was thought to be metaphor. But standing at the shore of modern Dwarka, where temples now rise beside the sea, you can almost hear it. The roar, the wave, the fall. And you wonder, what if the stories were never meant to be taken as fiction? What if they were memories, echoing through time, wrapped in poetry to survive the centuries? The underwater ruins of Dwarka don't just challenge the timeline of Indian history. They challenge the timeline of humanity itself. If the structures really are 9,000 years old, then our understanding of civilization, of when cities first emerged, must be rewritten. We have always believed that large-scale urban centers began around 4000 BCE. But what if they began much earlier? And what if the sea has hidden the evidence? Dwarka reminds us of a truth echoed across cultures, that the sea is not just a border, it is a vault, a library, And some of its books are beginning to open. Not all at once, not loudly, but in silence and stone. Few names stir the imagination quite like Atlantis. A city of shining marble, golden temples, and towering walls. A place of science, magic, and might. More advanced than any of its time. And then, gone. Swallowed by the sea in a single day and night. We don't know where it was. We don't know if it ever truly existed. But we've never stopped looking, because Atlantis is more than a lost city. It is an obsession, a riddle whispered through centuries, still unanswered. The story of Atlantis begins with one man, Plato. In 360 BCE, the Greek philosopher wrote of an island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. He claimed Atlantis was a naval power, vast and wealthy, with a society structured in perfect harmony. The people of Atlantis were strong, wise, and just, at first. But as their power grew, so did their pride. They began to conquer, to enslave, to defy the natural order. And so, according to Plato, the gods struck them down. In a single day, Atlantis was swallowed by the ocean, never to be seen again. Skeptics say Plato invented the story, a cautionary tale about hubris and empire. But others believe there's more beneath the surface. Over the centuries, explorers and dreamers have scoured the globe searching for Atlantis. Spain, Morocco, the Azores, the Caribbean, Antarctica. Even the Sahara Desert has been proposed, its strange concentric formations echoing Plato's descriptions. Still, no proof, no ruins, no certainty. And yet, the search continues. Why? Because we feel something. A pull. Because sometimes, stories survive for a reason. If Atlantis did exist, what kind of city might it have been? Plato described it as a series of concentric rings, alternating land and water. The central island held the royal palace and temple of Poseidon, encircled by great harbors, canals, and walls made of red, black, and white stone. The city glittered with orichalcum, a mysterious metal said to shine like fire. Its armies were mighty, its ships unmatched. It was, in every sense, a superpower of its time. And yet, it vanished. Whether by earthquake, a tsunami, or divine judgment, we may never know. One of the most compelling theories places Atlantis near the island of Santorini in the Aegean Sea. Here, around 1600 BCE, a volcanic eruption tore apart the island, collapsing the center, generating massive waves, and decimating the Minoan civilization. Could this have been the true Atlantis? The Minoans were advanced, with plumbing, art, and global trade. They lived on islands. They disappeared suddenly. The pieces fit, almost. But the myth remains just out of reach. Atlantis endures not because it was found, but because we still hope it might be. Because every dive into a strange ruin, every sonar scan of the ocean floor, every sunken temple, could be the clue that cracks the mystery open. But maybe Atlantis was never a place. Maybe it was a warning, a memory of something older than history, a time when we reached too far, too fast, and were pulled back beneath the waves. There is a line in Plato's writings that echoes. In a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. A simple sentence, but behind it, 1,000 questions. We may never find Atlantis, but the search changes us. It forces us to ask what came before, what we've lost, and what we're still blind to beneath the surface of our world. In the year 2001, a team of oceanographers was scanning the seafloor just off the western coast of Cuba. near the Guanahaca-Bibes Peninsula. They were looking for shipwrecks, Spanish galleons perhaps, gold, relics, the usual. But what they found was not a ship. It wasn't treasure. It wasn't anything they could explain. Deep beneath the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, their sonar picked up massive stone formations, rectangular, symmetrical, laid out in patterns, as if planned, as if it had once been a city. The company leading the survey was Advanced Digital Communications, working alongside Cuban authorities. Their equipment detected a grid-like arrangement of stones, some as large as buses, over 2,000 feet below the surface. The depth alone was stunning. If these structures were built on land, they must have been submerged more than 10,000 years ago. That's before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before any known civilization. So the questions began. Who could have built such a thing? How did it end up underwater? And could it be real? The discovery made headlines around the world. Lost city found beneath Cuba. Atlantis of the Caribbean. People were captivated. For a brief moment, the world looked at Cuba not for politics or cigars, but for mystery. But then, silence. Why? Because exploration stopped. Political tensions, lack of funding, and scientific skepticism froze the project. No detailed follow-up, no high-definition footage, only brief clips and grainy sonar maps. And so, like the ruins themselves, the story sank into the deep. What makes the Cuban anomaly so intriguing is not just its shape, but its depth. Most ancient sunken cities, like Heracleion or Dwarka, rest just a few meters beneath the surface, submerged gradually over time. But the structures off Cuba are half a mile down. That suggests a different kind of story. One involving cataclysm. Perhaps from the last ice age, when melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise dramatically. Perhaps from a sudden earthquake, or a violent collapse of land. Or perhaps it's not a city at all. Some geologists believe the formations are natural, shaped by volcanic activity or tectonic movement. They say the human eye finds patterns easily, even when none exist. But others aren't convinced. Let's imagine just for a moment that it was a city, a real one, built on the shores of a prehistoric island before rising seas claimed it forever. What kind of people lived there? Did they farm, worship, write, dream? Did they watch the water rise day by day, knowing their home would disappear? Or did it happen suddenly? One terrifying night, when the earth shook and the sea roared. No one knows. And that's the beauty of it. The ocean holds its secrets close. What we do know is this: human civilization is older than we once believed. And the deeper we dive, the more that belief is tested. The Cuban anomaly might never be explored again. It may remain for decades, a forgotten footnote in scientific archives. Or, someday, new technology may return to those depths. New eyes, new tools. And perhaps then, the story will rise again. Until then, it remains a question, a whisper in blue. The ancient Mayans believed that the sea was a gateway to the underworld, a place of memory, silence, and transformation. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps these ruins, if they are ruins at all, are not just lost. They are waiting. High in the eastern reaches of Turkey lies a body of water unlike any other. Lake Van, the largest lake in the country, nestled between mountain ranges, cold winds, and forgotten legends. Its water is ancient. So old, in fact, that it existed long before the first great cities of Mesopotamia. Before Babylon, before Ur. It is not just a lake, it is a witness, and it has seen kingdoms rise and sink. In 2017, a group of divers from Van Yuzunshu Yale University made a discovery beneath its surface. one that sent quiet ripples through the archaeological world. Nearly 65 feet below the surface, they found the remains of massive stone walls, a fortress, an ancient settlement, long hidden under the lake's shifting mineral-rich waters. The team believed the structure belonged to the Urartians, a mysterious Iron Age kingdom that flourished in this region around 3,000 years ago. But parts of the structure, they might be even older. The Urartu kingdom once stretched across what is now Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. They built fortresses, temples, and cities, often using massive squared stones fitted without mortar. Their gods were carved in stone. Their kings wrote in a language lost to time. But history forgets quickly. And over time, as volcanic activity changed the landscape and the lake's waters rose, the city disappeared. Today, you can't see it from the shore. But if you dive and look carefully, you'll find basalt blocks, cleanly cut. You'll find steps that lead to nowhere, and the outlines of a wall, built not by nature, by design. There's something surreal about a city beneath a freshwater lake. The ocean feels wild, untamed, but a lake? It should be calm, knowable, safe. And yet, Lake Van holds its secret quietly, as if trying to protect something sacred. Locals have whispered about things beneath the lake for centuries. Lights under the water, ancient structures, even lake monsters. But until recently, these were just stories. Now, they are history. What kind of people once walked these submerged walls? Did they light fires on the shore? Did they pray to forgotten gods, staring across the water at snow-capped mountains? Did they fear the rising tide? No one knows what catastrophe caused the city to vanish. Whether it was earthquakes, rising waters, or war, but one thing is clear. They were here, and now they are gone. What makes Lake Van especially haunting is its silence. No waves, no crashing surf, just stillness, a glassy surface, and below it, a kingdom no longer written in books, but in stone and silt. We often imagine history as something above ground. Ruins we can walk through, temples we can touch. But more and more, we're learning that some of humanity's most profound stories are beneath us. Beneath the sea, beneath lakes, beneath time itself. Lake Van may not be as famous as Atlantis or as dramatic as Dwarka, but it is real. It is there, waiting. And in that waiting, there is magic. On the eastern edge of South America, where the Atlantic waves curl and break along Brazil's golden shores, lies a stretch of ocean that has long whispered strange tales. To the human eye, it's just water. Endless, blue, restless. But beneath the waves, there are stones. And some of them don't belong. Off the coast of the Bahia region, just beyond the reach of swimmers and surfers, divers have reported curious sightings for decades. Rectangular slabs, aligned patterns, rock formations that resemble roads and platforms, stretching in deliberate directions beneath the surf. Fishermen spoke of odd shapes below their boats. Locals told of ruins from a land that sank. And explorers wondered, could this be part of something forgotten? Perhaps the remnants of an ancient people. Perhaps the edge of a lost continent. Some even gave it a name, Zaratan. Zaratan appears in old sea myths, sometimes as an island, sometimes as a creature. A landmass that moves, that breathes. But in Brazil, it became a symbol, a name for something hidden just off the coast. Something built by hands older than memory. In the 1980s, Brazilian geologists studying the seabed near Recife and Bahia documented rock formations made of granite, a type of stone rarely found on the ocean floor. Granite forms on land, not underwater, which means These stones may once have stood above sea level, part of a continent, a shoreline, a city, now drowned. Some scientists believe they could be the vestiges of Doggerland-like land bridges, territories that once connected continents during the Ice Age, when sea levels were lower by hundreds of feet. Others propose they are remnants of the elusive Atlantis-like landmass, part of an ancient civilization that flourished before recorded history, then fell, and was buried. But the mystery persists because evidence is limited. Few expeditions, limited technology, and waves that never stop crashing down on the truth. Imagine diving off the Brazilian coast. The water is warm, pulsing with life. You descend past the coral, past the fish, and suddenly you see it. A row of stone blocks. Too neat to be natural, too aligned to be random. You run your hand along a seam, the edge between two ancient stones, and wonder who stood here, when, and why did they disappear? The deeper mystery is not just the stones, but what they suggest. That before our cities, before our history, there may have been others. People who built, people who carved and worshipped and charted the stars, and then vanished. And perhaps, just perhaps, their last monuments now lie broken beneath the tide. The Brazilian coast mystery is still unsolved. No definitive excavations, no carbon dating. Only sonar images and stories. But that in itself is telling. Because the ocean has never given up its secrets easily. It waits and watches, and sometimes, just sometimes, lets a piece of the past surface. Between the eastern coast of England and the lowlands of Europe, there lies a stretch of water known as the North Sea. Its waves are gray and cold. Its winds are sharp. And its depths are ancient. But once, not long ago in the scale of time, this was not sea. It was land. Rolling hills, rivers, forests, a place teeming with life. Mammoths, wolves, human beings. They lived, hunted, and wandered across a land now lost beneath the sea. A land we now call Doggerland. Roughly 12,000 years ago, during the end of the last ice age, the North Sea was a dry plain. Sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. Britain was not an island. It was part of mainland Europe. And in the space where the waves now crash, people lived. They built no pyramids, left behind no stone cities. But they existed, quietly, in tents and huts, beside lakes and rivers. They left behind arrowheads, bone tools, and traces of fire. Then, the waters rose. As the earth warmed, ice sheets melted. The oceans swelled. And Doggerland began to drown. Slowly, then suddenly. A massive tsunami, triggered by the Storega slide off the coast of Norway, may have been the final blow. A wall of water, a sound like thunder, and then silence. The Fattudahala people, the world they knew, gone. For centuries, no one remembered Doggerland. There were no myths about it, no legends passed down. Only fishermen, hauling up bones and stone tools in their nets, wondering how they came from the sea. Then in the 1990s, sonar scans and underwater archaeology revealed the truth. The seabed was once forest, once fields, once home. It wasn't a city, but it was a world. The idea that an entire landscape could vanish beneath the sea and be forgotten shakes the soul. Because Doggerland reminds us that nothing is fixed, not even the ground beneath our feet. Our cities, our homes, our monuments, they are all temporary. Time, tide, and Earth's slow breath will take everything back. Imagine standing on a grassy hill 10,000 years ago. You look toward what is now the English Channel and see no sea, just plains, herds of reindeer, the smoke of distant fires. Now imagine standing in the same place today. Only waves, endless, rolling gray, and somewhere beneath them, a memory no one speaks of. Doggerland may not hold the grandeur of Atlantis or the temples of Dwarka, but it holds something more fragile, evidence of life. Ordinary, beautiful human life, lost to the rising tide. And it asks us to remember, before there were stories of gods and kings, there were people. People who lived and loved and were washed away. Beneath the gentle waters off the coast of Laconia in southern Greece, a city sleeps. Its name is Pavlopetri, and it is not a myth, not a mystery, but a reality, etched into the seabed, stone by stone. It is the oldest known submerged city in the world, over 5,000 years old, older than Homer, older than Mycenae, older than written Greek itself, and yet it still stands. Discovered in 1967 by British archaeologist Nicholas Fleming and studied in detail in the years that followed, Pavlopetri stunned researchers. What they expected to be scattered ruins turned out to be an entire city layout, preserved beneath the water with eerie clarity. Streets, buildings, tombs, courtyards, even plumbing systems, channels carved into the stone to guide water. It was like walking through a ghost town, a place once alive with voices, footsteps, laughter, now silent, only touched by waves and time. What made Pavlopetri remarkable was its organization. It wasn't a pile of rubble, it wasn't chaos. It was a city, planned with care, with roads aligned, buildings grouped by function, and homes laid out in patterns that spoke of intention, culture, and community. This was no primitive village. This was civilization. Scientists believe Pavlopetri was part of the Minoan or Mycenaean world, dating back to around 2800 BCE. Its people were traders, artisans, farmers. They worshipped gods we no longer know, spoke languages lost to time, but they left something behind, and the sea preserved it. Why did it sink? Most likely, earthquakes. Greece sits on a bed of shifting faults. One powerful quake, followed by rising tides, may have submerged the city, little by little, until it was gone. But unlike Atlantis, Pavlopetri didn't vanish into myth. It remained, just beneath the surface, waiting to be seen again. Imagine swimming above it today. The water is clear. Sunlight dances on stone, and below you, the outline of homes, rectangular, familiar. You can trace the path of streets. You can float above doorways where families once stood. There are no guards, no fences, just you, and the memory of a world that once breathed here. It's haunting, not because it's gone, but because it's so real. Pavlopetri forces us to ask, how much have we lost without knowing? How many cities lie just a few meters beneath the waves, forgotten because no one thought to look? And how many stories still sleep in the sand? Unlike many underwater sites, Pavlopetri has been mapped in high detail, using 3D laser scanning and virtual reconstruction. We can now walk through it, digitally, as it once was. We can stand in its agora, sit at the edge of its canals, follow the same paths its people once did. Technology has given voice to silence, and from that silence, a story emerges. Not of kings or legends, but of ordinary people, of families, of trade, of art. They were not gods, but they were human, and their lives mattered. Long before Rome rose, before Athens flourished, there were the Phoenicians, seafarers, traders, builders of cities and ships, the first to ride the open sea with purpose, not fear. They built their homes along the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, in what is now modern-day Lebanon. Cities like Byblos, Sidon, and Tyre stood as bright stars in the dawn of civilization. And like all stars, some would fall, some would sink. Among the ruins of the Phoenicians lie stories of sunken harbors, stone quays, lost warehouses, all beneath the sea. Beneath the modern coastlines of Lebanon, divers have discovered strange remains, blocks of ancient stone, submerged roads, and ruins that extend far beyond the current shoreline. These were not just eroded cliffs or collapsed hillsides. They were built, carved, and placed by human hands. Once they stood above the waves. Now they lie in silence, embraced by the tide. The most mysterious of these is found near Tyre, a city once famed for its purple dye, its mighty ships, and its resistance to empires. What we see of Tyre today, on land, is only a fraction of what once was. The ancient Phoenician city stretched into the sea, built on artificial causeways and harbors. But much of it is now underwater, the result of centuries of erosion, earthquakes, and rising seas. Divers exploring the coast have found remnants of old seawalls, column bases, and jetties, buried beneath centuries of silt, as if the city kept walking into the sea. Phoenician engineering was legendary. They built harbors that channeled the tides, that cradled ships like sleeping giants. They carved their cities from limestone, fitted without mortar. And they taught the world how to sail. And yet, even they, masters of the sea, could not stop it. Time, water, and trembling earth reclaimed what was theirs. Byblos, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, holds similar secrets. Near its coast, submerged structures hint at ancient breakwaters, stone barriers that once protected a bustling trade port. Boats arrived from Egypt, Cyprus, Crete, loaded with papyrus, wine, and precious timber. But now, only fish swim among the stones. It's easy to forget that these civilizations were not frozen in myth. They were alive, messy, vibrant, real. People laughed here, worked, loved, prayed, and then watched, generation by generation, as the sea crept forward. A harbor becomes a ruin becomes a reef, and history turns into silence. Standing on the modern shorelines of Lebanon, it's hard to imagine the cities that once stood farther out, built where waves now dance. But beneath the surface, the stones remain, cracked, shifted, but not gone. The Phoenicians may have been the first to understand the ocean's power, but even they could not outrun it. What we're left with is legacy, not just sunken ruins, but ideas. The Phoenicians gave us the alphabet. They mapped the winds. They connected worlds. And when the sea took their cities, it could not take their memory. Hidden beneath the still, jade-colored waters of Qiandao Lake, in the eastern province of Zhejiang, China, lies a city that once stood proudly beneath the mountains. Its name was Cheng, the Lion City. Unlike Atlantis or Dwarka, Cheng did not vanish because of time, nature, or catastrophe. It was buried, by design. And yet, its story is no less haunting, because beneath the quiet lake, Cheng still stands. Built during the Eastern Han Dynasty nearly 1,400 years ago, Cheng was once a political and economic hub nestled between 5 majestic mountains. It thrived for centuries, a city of gates and towers, of intricate carvings, of homes, markets, and temples. Then in 1959, the government chose the valley as the site for a massive hydroelectric dam. To create the reservoir, they would need to flood the valley. Cheng and the nearby towns would be sacrificed. Residents were relocated, walls were marked, and the city that had stood for over a millennium was drowned. By the time the water settled, over 300 square miles were submerged. 1,000 islands rose from the flood, hence the name Qiandao, or Thousand Island Lake. But what few knew was that beneath those waters, a city still waited. For decades, Xucheng was forgotten, a name on a map, a memory in the minds of elders. Then in 2001, divers rediscovered it. What they saw astonished them. Stone archways, roads, pagodas, perfectly preserved underwater, untouched by wind or rain. The water had become a time capsule. The carvings of dragons, phoenixes, and ancient scripts remained sharp, as if etched yesterday. Even wooden beams had resisted decay, shielded from oxygen and erosion. Today, Xicheng is known as China's Atlantis. But unlike the legends, it didn't vanish. It simply shifted from mountain city to submerged monument. Its preservation is so pristine, so surreal, that it feels more like a dream than a ruin. Divers drift through archways. They glide down alleyways once crowded with merchants. They pass stone lions, still guarding doors no one enters. It is beautiful, and sad, and still alive, in a way most ruins are not. There is something poetic about a city lost to human progress. We did not lose Xicheng to a tsunami or a shifting continent. We chose to let it go, in the name of light, energy, and growth. But the city refused to vanish. Xicheng reminds us that not all sunken cities are ancient mysteries. Some are sacrifices. Others are stories of change. But all are worth remembering. Because beneath every submerged ruin is a question. What are we willing to leave behind? Now, in the modern age, Xicheng has become a site of underwater tourism. Only a few can dive there, but those who do return with stories of silence, beauty, and reverence. A sunken city not broken, but preserved, as if the lake itself is protecting it. Between Europe and Asia lies a body of water vast and still. The Black Sea. Its name evokes mystery, but beneath its surface, beyond the legends, lies a story far older, one that may have changed the course of human memory. A story of water, of sudden rising tides, and of a flood so great it may have become the foundation of myths told in every corner of the world. Thousands of years ago, the Black Sea was not what it is today. Back then, around 7,600 years ago, it was a much smaller freshwater lake, landlocked and surrounded by human settlements. People farmed along its shores, they built homes, they buried their dead, and they lived as if the world would never change. But change came with a roar. As global temperatures rose at the end of the last ice age, oceans swelled. The Mediterranean Sea, higher and heavier than the Black Sea, pushed northward. Then one day, perhaps in a single catastrophic event, the waters broke through the Bosporus. Salt water rushed in with the force of 1,000 rivers, carving canyons, flooding valleys, and consuming the land. In a matter of months, maybe weeks, entire villages were drowned. Farmlands vanished, and the peaceful freshwater lake became a saltwater sea. The people who lived there, they fled, or perished, or remembered, and from that memory, the myth of a great flood was born. In 1997, geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed this theory, known as the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. Their research suggested that this ancient flood may have been the real-life event behind flood legends like Noah's Ark from the Hebrew Bible, Utnapishtim's Ark from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh floods in Hindu, Sumerian, and Native American traditions. It made sense. Imagine watching the sea rise dozens of meters, swallowing your world, and leaving no trace but water. Wouldn't you tell that story? Wouldn't your children? Later expeditions found submerged riverbeds, terraces, and possible man-made structures deep beneath the Black Sea. Archaeologists uncovered tools and artifacts on the seafloor, evidence of habitation where no sea should be. The clues are there, but the proof remains elusive, scattered and silted. Still, something happened, something enormous, something terrifying, and something humanity never forgot. The Black Sea reminds us that not every lost city is made of stone. Some are made of stories, passed from father to son, mother to daughter, embroidered in myth, carried across lands and generations, until one day a man sits and writes, and the waters prevailed upon the earth, and all the high hills were covered. Perhaps it began here, in the shadow of the Bosporus, with a sound like thunder, and a silence that followed. What did they see, those people on the shore? What did they feel as the water came closer, faster, unstoppable? Perhaps they prayed. Perhaps they ran. Perhaps they built boats and survived. And if they did, perhaps they carried not just tools, but memory. Memory of a world beneath the sea, far from the crashing waves of oceans, nestled within the heart of North America, lies a vast, silent inland sea, Lake Huron. Cold, deep, timeless. To most, it is just a lake, a place for fishing, sailing, and childhood memories. But deep beneath its surface, hidden for thousands of years, is a lost landscape. Not a city, not a temple, but something even more astonishing. A stone highway, carved by ice, used by ancient people, and forgotten beneath the water for over 9,000 years. In 2009, a team of researchers led by archaeologist John O'Shea made a discovery unlike anything found before in the Great Lakes region. Using sonar and remote-operated vehicles, they explored the submerged Alpena Amberley Ridge, an ancient limestone ridge that once connected northern Michigan to southern Ontario. Back when glaciers still gripped the earth, and Lake Huron's basin was a dry, windswept plain. And what they found changed everything. There, 120 feet below the surface, was a series of carefully placed stone formations. Long lines of boulders, V-shaped traps, corridors. Not natural, not accidental. These were the tools of hunters, specifically caribou hunters, early peoples who lived in the twilight of the Ice Age. They would have used these stone alignments as drives, channels to funnel herds toward waiting hunters, just as indigenous groups later used wooden fences on land. These discoveries prove something profound, that humans thrived here long before written history. They moved with the seasons, they built, they organized, and they understood the land in ways we are only now beginning to rediscover. When sea levels rose, the ridge vanished beneath the water, and so did the memory of what had stood upon it. What makes this story even more powerful is its silence. No monuments, no cities, just stone, bone, and intent. And yet, it whispers across time. Here, beneath the cold waters of Lake Huron, we find the footsteps of a forgotten people. They did not leave temples, but they left design. They did not write texts, but they left strategy. And in doing so, they became part of the deeper narrative of humanity. Imagine walking across that dry ridge, 9,000 years ago. The air sharp with cold, the sound of hooves in the distance. Your tribe moving as one, quiet, alert. Stones mark your path. The ancestors before you set them there. You trust them. And when the hunt ends, you give thanks. You share the meat, and you live. Now imagine that same place, 100 feet beneath you, drowned in blue. The underwater stone drive in Lake Huron is more than archaeology. It is a memory carved into the earth. It tells us that even here, far from the palaces of Egypt or the shrines of Japan, people were shaping the world. And when the world changed, their story did not end. It waited to be found. The Arctic. White. Endless. Silent. A land of snow and stars, of howling wind and time slowed to a breath. Most imagine it barren, a place untouched, uninhabitable, forgotten by history. But under the thick crust of permafrost, beneath frigid coastal seas and frozen tundra, there are secrets, whispers of warmth, of life, of people who came before, and some of what they left behind now lies beneath the ice. Archaeologists and climate scientists, working along the coasts of Siberia, Alaska, and the Canadian Arctic, have uncovered strange remnants, tools buried in submerged beaches, bones beneath frozen shorelines, wooden foundations beneath retreating glaciers. Evidence that ancient humans once lived in places now underwater or encased in ice, places that were once rich with grasslands, forests, and migrating herds. As the last ice age ended, these Arctic coastlines changed dramatically. Rivers shifted, ice sheets melted, seas rose by hundreds of feet, and the homes of these early Arctic peoples were swallowed. Much of this evidence comes from Beringia, a vast land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska, a corridor for both animals and early humans. For thousands of years, people lived in this region, hunting mammoths, building shelters, and following the rhythms of ice and light. But today, most of Beringia is gone. Beneath the Bering Sea, beneath miles of cold water, lie the bones of a world once walked. In Nunavut, Canada, retreating glaciers have revealed signs of early settlements, stone rings from tents, tools carved from bone and ivory, even ancient footprints in soft, thawing ground. And off the coast of Alaska, sonar scans suggest that submerged ridges may hold structures waiting to be verified. Because in the Arctic, exploration is slow. The ice guards its truths, but the ice is melting, and what has slept for millennia is beginning to wake. The thought is humbling, that humans lived and thrived in places we now call uninhabitable. They adapted, they survived, and they built homes that lasted long enough to leave a mark beneath the frost. Imagine standing on the shore of the Arctic 12,000 years ago. It's summer. The ice has pulled back. Caribou graze nearby. The sun hovers low, never quite setting. You walk with others, gathering wood for a fire. Your camp sits near a river. You know the land. You trust the seasons. But they begin to change. The water rises, the ice returns, then vanishes. And one day, your home is gone. Beneath water, beneath ice, beneath time. For most of history, we have looked south for civilization. To deserts, to temples, to sunlight and stone. But now, we are beginning to see that the North has its stories too. And they are older, quieter, but no less human. The Arctic's frozen secrets may never be fully uncovered. Much lies too deep, too remote, or lost to the shifting Earth. But every year, as the climate changes, new traces emerge. A tool here, a wall there, a footprint pressed in ancient mud, and each one whispers, "We were here." In the misty jungles of Cambodia, among roots and shadows, the stones of an ancient empire still breathe. The Khmer civilization, known for its majestic cities and sacred temples, left behind some of the most breathtaking architecture the world has ever seen. Angkor Wat, Bayon, Ta Prohm. Temples carved in devotion, draped now in vines and silence. But beyond the visible ruins, beyond the jungle and the earth, lie temples lost not to time, but to water. Because as the Khmer rose, they reshaped the land with ponds, reservoirs, and canals. And when they fell, the waters reclaimed what they built. The Khmer Empire flourished from the 9th to the 15th century, a golden age of Southeast Asia. They were masters of stone, of irrigation, of scale. Their cities were not just places to live. They were cosmic mandalas, reflections of the heavens, built in harmony with rivers, seasons, and stars. But something happened. A slow unraveling. Perhaps drought, perhaps war, perhaps the overreach of even their genius. And in time, the jungle returned. The rains came, and some of their temples vanished beneath rising waters. In the Tonle Sap Lake and its floodplains, the beating heart of Cambodia, researchers have found remnants of stone platforms, stepped walls, and sculpted blocks, all underwater. Ancient boat landings, temple foundations, paths once walked by priests and kings, now drowned by sediment and shifting tide. In Kampong Phluk and Kampong Kleang, villages built on stilts rise above the lake's seasonal flood. But beneath those waters, the land once held sacred shrines. Sanctuaries now submerged half the year, their memory fading with every ripple. Fishermen speak of carved stones below their nets. Locals whisper of spirits still watching from below. And archaeologists map faint outlines on sonar scans, waiting for the dry season when the lake recedes and stone breathes air again. What is most haunting is how these temples disappeared without collapse. They were not burned, not broken. They were simply absorbed. The jungle grew, the rains returned, the lake rose, and the temples, those prayers in stone, became part of the landscape once more. Imagine standing at the water's edge, the soft splash of a boat paddle in the distance, dragonflies flickering in the golden heat. Beneath you, a staircase, once carved, once climbed, now home to fish, to moss, to stillness. You can almost feel the chants that once echoed there, now carried only by wind and wave. The Khmer saw water not as a threat, but as a tool. They tamed it, redirected it, worshipped it. And in the end, they returned to it. Their cities did not fall like empires of stone. They faded into water, into vine, into memory. What we see above the surface, the mighty Angkor complex, is only a portion of what was. Beneath lake and river lie the rest, undocumented, unmapped, awaiting dry seasons, or the patient work of divers and dreamers. The temples of the Khmer are a reminder. Not all ruins rise into the sky. Some sink into the earth, into water, and into the soul of a place. And still, they whisper, "We were sacred once, we still are." Before Babylon, before Nineveh, there was Uruk, the first true city of earth. Rising from the floodplains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Uruk was the beating heart of ancient Mesopotamia. A city of stone and story, of clay tablets and kings, of ziggurats reaching toward the sky. But time shifts, rivers wander, and what once stood tall now lies beneath silt, sand, and in places, water. Uruk was the city of Gilgamesh, the legendary king whose story became one of the world's first epics. He built walls 10 cubits high, temples of carved brick, and a kingdom of strength and sorrow. For centuries, Uruk thrived. Its people were the pioneers of writing, law, astronomy. And yet, like all things, it passed. The rivers that gave it life changed course. The earth swallowed its streets. Floods came, again and again, and parts of Uruk, like whispers of a forgotten age, slipped beneath the marshes and were lost. Modern archaeologists have uncovered much of Uruk's ruins in present-day Iraq. But some believe more remains buried, perhaps even submerged beneath the shifting waters of the Euphrates. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and historical accounts point to areas where walls, roads, and water channels once flourished, now flooded or swallowed by the fertile but unstable terrain of southern Mesopotamia. And the myths? They remember. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of floods, of gods angry with humanity, of cities cleansed by water. One legend even predates the biblical flood, Utnapishtim, the Sumerian Noah, surviving in a boat as the world drowned. It's easy to dismiss myth, until the river rises and takes your city with it. Uruk was not lost like Atlantis. It did not vanish in a single night. It sank slowly, dignified, through centuries of silt and silence. Farmers plowed fields above what was once a ziggurat. Fishermen cast nets over buried walls. Children played, unaware their feet danced over clay tablets written 5,000 years ago. Imagine walking through the marshes today. The reeds sway, the water ripples, and somewhere below, a brick with cuneiform etched by hand waits for the sun to find it again. The great rivers still flow. They flood, they recede, and with every rise and fall, they rewrite the land. What we know of Uruk is only a part. The rest may lie beneath shallow water, beneath the ancient rhythm of flood and drought. Waiting. Uruk reminds us that civilization doesn't begin with steel or skyscrapers. It begins with stories, with rivers, with people who gather, build, dream. And sometimes, what they leave behind is not just ruins, but the very idea of a city. Far across the open waters of the Pacific Ocean, beyond the coral reefs of Micronesia, lies a place the sea has tried and failed to forget. Nan Madol. They call it the Venice of the Pacific, a city built not on land, but on the surface of a lagoon. A city of basalt and silence, a puzzle of stone and seawater. And to this day, no one knows how it came to be. Nan Madol rests off the eastern shore of the island of Pohnpei. It is a complex of over 90 artificial islets, linked by tidal canals, resting atop coral reefs, a floating city of stone, surrounded on all sides by water. Each islet holds what remains of temples, tombs, and dwellings. Some walls rising over 20 feet, built from columnar basalt logs, each weighing several tons. And yet, somehow, they were moved, stacked, arranged with precision and purpose. No mortar, no cranes, no written record, just stone and silence. How the ancient builders transported and lifted these basalt columns remains a mystery. No known quarry exists on Pohnpei itself, suggesting the stones were brought from miles away, through dense jungle, across water, and lifted by means now lost to time. Some locals still say the stones flew. According to oral traditions, Nan Madol was built by two brothers, Olisichpa and Olosochpa, sorcerers from a faraway land, who summoned the stones with chants and spirits. When one brother died, the other ruled alone, founding the Saudeleur dynasty, which governed the island for centuries from this watery seat of power. At its height, Nan Madol was a sacred political and religious center. High priests performed rituals, kings issued decrees, and commoners were forbidden from living within the complex. They came only to serve or to die. The city was meant to separate royalty from the people, to elevate rule to the level of the divine. above land, above the tide. But in time, even kings were humbled. When the Saudeleur fell, Madol was abandoned. The jungle crept forward. The sea rose. And what had once been a city of power became a city of ghosts. Today, much of Madol is slowly drowning. Some islets have crumbled. Others are covered in moss and root. Still, the basalt walls remain, dark, heavy, stacked like black bones against a pale green sea. And when the tide rolls in, water fills the ancient canals, and the city seems to breathe once more. Divers and archaeologists have explored beneath the lagoon's surface, finding sunken walls, collapsed structures, and signs that the city may extend farther underwater than we ever imagined. Some believe Madol may have begun as a land-based settlement, then was overtaken by rising seas. Others think it was always meant to float, a deliberate dance between land and ocean. Either way, it is one of the only known cities in the world built entirely on a coral reef. Imagine drifting in a canoe at twilight. The water is still. The stones rise beside you, mute, immovable. A breeze carries the scent of salt and flowers. And for a moment, you are not in the present. You are with the spirits, with the builders, in a place where the sea once obeyed men, and now reclaims them. Madol reminds us that greatness isn't always measured in height, but in endurance. The city endures, not just in stone, but in mystery. And that, sometimes, is the most sacred thing of all.
On the southeastern coast of India, where the Bay of Bengal rolls gently onto golden shores, there stands a temple. Shore Temple, they call it. A sacred structure carved in granite, its spire reaching skyward. But for centuries, local legend has whispered something more. That this temple, that 6 others once stood beside it, gleaming along the coast like sentinels of stone. 7 pagodas, 7 shrines, 7 sacred structures, of which only one remains. The others, swallowed by the sea. The tale of the 7 pagodas has been passed down for generations in Tamil Nadu. It speaks of a radiant city, Mahabalipuram, where temples lined the shore, dedicated to gods of strength and wisdom. But one day, the sea grew jealous, and in a single surge, it consumed 6 of the 7, leaving only one to remember. For centuries, this was myth, poetic, beautiful, unconfirmed, until the ocean pulled back its veil. In December 2004, a massive earthquake beneath the Indian Ocean triggered a devastating tsunami, one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. But along the coast of Mahabalipuram, the retreating tide revealed something unexpected. Stone walls, carvings, sculptures, emerging from the sand and shallow surf. Fishermen stared in awe. Scholars took note. The sea, in its fury, had given a glimpse of truth. Soon after, archaeological dives began along the coastline, and what they found echoed the old legends. Submerged foundations, carved from granite sculptures of lions, standing guard beneath the seawalls aligned with temples above, suggesting a larger complex long lost. Suddenly, the story of the 7 pagodas. It was memory. The city of Mahabalipuram dates back to the Pallava dynasty. The shore temple we see today was part of a greater vision, a network of shrines, monoliths, and cave temples, celebrating divine order, celestial geometry. But the coastline is unforgiving. Storms erode, tides shift. Over time, what was once sacred land became sacred sea. Imagine standing at the water's edge during low tide. The waves pull back, your feet sink into wet sand. And just beneath the surface you see a face, chiseled in stone. It does not weep, but it remembers. To this day, much of what lies beneath Mahabalipuram's coastal waters remains unexplored. Tides shift, visibility fades, but divers return, year after year, mapping, documenting, and in every uncovered carving, the legend breathes again. The 7 pagodas remind us that even myth can be rooted in truth, and that sometimes the stories we inherit are the last threads of something far more real than we dared believe. Only one temple stands today, but the other 6, perhaps they have not vanished. Perhaps they still stand, just deeper, in a place where water holds memory tighter than stone ever could. And perhaps, on some quiet morning, when the tide is just right, you may glimpse the spire of another pagoda, waiting to rise again. Beneath the waves, beyond the reach of light, the deep ocean, cold, black, vast, holds more mystery than the surface of the moon. And in that crushing silence, on the floor of the Earth's last great frontier, lie shapes, structures, shadows. Some call them tricks of rock and pressure. Others are not so sure. In recent years, advances in sonar and submersible technology have allowed us to scan the seabed at unimaginable depths. From the mid-Atlantic ridge to the South Pacific trenches, grids, angles, symmetries that seem too precise. One such discovery, made by satellite imagery and sonar, sparked a flurry of speculation. A square formation nearly 100 miles wide, far beneath the surface off the coast of Africa's Canary Islands. Geologists said a glitch, an artifact of sonar stitching, a mistake. But others looked closer and saw roads, walls, a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Whether this formation is a city, or simply the sea playing with our perception, there is still so much we do not know. The deep ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, and yet less than 20% has been mapped in detail. We've lived beside the sea for millennia, but we have barely touched its soul. Every sunken ruin, every flooded road, every carved stone beneath the tide reminds us of something humbling. We are not the beginning, and we will not be the end. Civilizations have risen, they have fallen, and in between, they have disappeared. Not into fire, not into myth, but into water. The ocean is not destruction, it is remembrance. It holds what we forget. It preserves what we abandon. It hides not out of cruelty, but out of care. And maybe that's why we keep searching. Not just for cities, but for ourselves. For the parts of us that once believed in things greater than logic. In stone that could float, in temples beneath the waves, in memory deeper than time. So we dive, again and again, into darkness, into mystery. And sometimes, we surface with a piece of the past clutched in our hands. A shard, a symbol, a story. You've traveled through 20 lost cities, across oceans, through rivers, beneath lakes, and into myths. And what have we found? That we are not the first, that the earth is older than we act, and that silence often speaks the loudest truths. One day, perhaps, the sea will reveal everything. The final temple, the true Atlantis, the last name carved in stone. But until then, let us listen, let us wonder, and let us remember. The lost cities beneath the waves are never truly gone. They are still there, still watching, still waiting.